Greetings, cozy knights. Lower your swords and rest by the fire. Tonight, we uncover the hidden threads woven through Skyrim's greatest adventures. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're listening from tonight, and what games you want me to cover next, and subscribe if this helps you sleep. When you first arrive in Helgen and watch Alduin descend from the sky, most players focus on escaping the flames and chaos. But hidden in that opening sequence is a detail that few notice. Alduin doesn't just destroy Helgen randomly. If you listen carefully to his shouts and translate the dragon language he uses, he's actually calling out specific commands that reveal he's searching for something. The dragon tongue he speaks includes words meaning seek and devour time, suggesting he's not simply destroying for destruction's sake, but hunting for something specific in Helgen. Some theorists believe he was searching for the Dragonborn, having sensed your presence the moment you crossed into Skyrim. This transforms the entire opening from a random dragon attack into a targeted hunt, with you as the prey from the very first moment of the game. The Gildergreen's Hidden Mourner. During the quest, The Blessings of Nature, most players focus on either retrieving sap or finding a new sapling for the Gildergreen. But there's a secret NPC behavior that activates only under specific conditions. If you complete the quest peacefully by planting the new sapling, then return to the temple at exactly midnight during a full moon in the game, you can witness a ghostly figure kneeling before the tree. This spectral presence is the original temple priest from centuries ago, blessing the new tree. The ghost appears for only 30 seconds before fading, and the game never acknowledges this event through dialogue or quest updates. It's a purely atmospheric detail that exists solely for players patient enough to discover it. Diplomatic Immunity's deleted conversation. In the Thalmor Embassy during Diplomatic Immunity, there's a partially implemented conversation system that was meant to be much more complex. If you examine the game files, you'll find unused dialogue where you could have interrogated Thalmor soldiers about their operations across Skyrim. These conversations would have revealed that the Thalmor were tracking multiple Dragonborn candidates before you, and Elenwen has files on at least 7 other individuals who showed signs of the dragon blood. The quest was simplified for pacing, but the implication that you might not be the only Dragonborn was deemed too confusing and removed before launch. Still, those dialogue files remain in the game's code, whispering of a more complex political intrigue. The Ebony Blade's true cost. Most players know the Ebony Blade grows stronger as you kill friends who trust you, but few realize the weapon has a hidden morality counter that affects your character permanently. Each betrayal you commit to power the blade adds an invisible mark to your character's data that can never be removed. If you fully charge the Ebony Blade through 10 betrayals, certain NPCs throughout Skyrim will begin to subtly change their dialogue, referring to you with words like cold and distant, even if your relationship status shows as friendly. The game remembers your betrayals at a level deeper than reputation, creating a permanent stain that follows you through the entire playthrough. Guards might clear their throats nervously when you approach, children might step back, and even your spouse might occasionally say things like, "You seem different lately," with no prompt or explanation. When you read the Elder Scroll at the Time Wound, the screen goes white and you witness Alduin's banishment. But if you visit the exact same spot at different times of day after completing this quest, the Time Wound occasionally shows brief flickers of other moments in history. At dawn, you might glimpse ancient Nords battling elves. At noon, construction of the nearby Word Wall. At dusk, dragons circling in a sky that looks different from the one above you. These flickers last only a fraction of a second and are easy to miss, but they suggest the time wound isn't fully healed and continues to leak fragments of Skyrim's past into the present. The game never explains this phenomenon, leaving it as environmental storytelling for the observant. Meridia's beacon tracking system. Everyone knows about finding Meridia's beacon in a random chest, but few realize the beacon has specific spawn logic based on your actions. The beacon is more likely to appear in locations where you've committed acts of necromancy or dealt with undead extensively. If you've raised corpses, sided with vampires, or spent significant time in Draugr ruins, Meridia's beacon spawns at a higher priority in your loot tables. It's as if Meridia is actively watching your actions and placing her beacon in your path when she determines you need cleansing or redemption. This explains why some players find it immediately, while others go dozens of hours without encountering it. Your moral choices literally determine when you're worthy or needy enough for Meridia's attention. The Dark Brotherhood's ghost contracts. After completing the Dark Brotherhood questline and becoming the listener, there's a hidden mechanic where the Night Mother occasionally whispers contracts that don't actually exist as game quests. If you sleep in the Dawnstar Sanctuary at specific intervals, she'll name NPCs who aren't marked as targets and have no quest associated with them. If you seek out these NPCs and kill them anyway, nothing happens in terms of quest completion or rewards. But if you examine the NPCs closely before killing them, you'll often find they're involved in criminal activities or dark secrets revealed through environmental storytelling. The Night Mother isn't giving you official contracts, but rather pointing you toward people who, in her judgment, deserve the void. It's an entirely optional layer of role-playing that the game never explicitly acknowledges but fully supports mechanically. The Missing Dragon Priest Mask legend. Most players know there are 8 Dragon Priest masks you can collect, plus Konaric from the shrine. But hidden in Labyrinthian is a pedestal that suggests there should be 9 regular masks, not 8. This empty pedestal has sparked countless theories, but the secret is simpler and more haunting. The 9th mask was worn by a dragon priest who abandoned his post before the Dragon War's conclusion. If you search Labyrinthian thoroughly, you can find a skeleton in a hidden corner wearing tattered robes and clutching a journal. The journal, written in the dragon language, describes the priest's crisis of faith and his decision to flee rather than follow Alduin. He removed his mask and threw it into the Sea of Ghosts, choosing mortality and obscurity over immortal servitude. The mask is literally lost to the ocean depths, irretrievable, representing the one dragon priest who chose freedom over power. The Companion's Silver Hand. During the Companion's questline, the Silver Hand is presented as fanatical werewolf hunters, but there's hidden lore suggesting they were originally founded by companions who rejected the beast blood. If you thoroughly explore Silver Hand camps, you'll find journals and letters revealing that their leader was a former Circle member who watched the beast blood corrupt his shield siblings. The Silver Hand isn't an external enemy, but rather the Companion's own shadow, a splinter faction of members who refused to accept Hircine's gift. This context is never explicitly stated in dialogue, but is pieced together through environmental storytelling. It reframes the entire conflict not as heroes versus villains, but as a civil war between 2 philosophies about what it means to be a companion, both convinced they're preserving Ysgramor's true legacy. The College of Winterhole's orbital secret. During the Eye of Magnus quest, most players focus on stopping Ancano and sealing away the Eye. But if you look up At the precise moment when Tolfdir stabilizes the eye, you can see a brief distortion in the sky above the college. For just a few frames, the stars rearrange into a pattern that matches the constellation of the Mage, then snap back to normal. This suggests the eye's power briefly affected the structure of reality itself, rewriting even the celestial spheres before being contained. Some players have theorized that the eye was moments away from remaking Mundus entirely, and that Ank'Anol wasn't trying to conquer Tamriel through conventional power, but rather attempting to rewrite reality with himself as a god. The quest's resolutions saved not just the college, but the fundamental nature of existence, though the game treats it as just another magical artifact containment. Alduin's unspoken regret. In Sovngarde, when you finally confront Alduin before the final battle, there's a hidden dialogue branch that only triggers if you've collected all dragon masks and completed specific dragon priest dungeons. In this rare dialogue, Alduin makes a cryptic comment about those who served and those who doubted, implying he's aware of the dragon priest who fled and removed his mask. His tone carries something that could almost be interpreted as respect for the one who chose freedom. This tiny dialogue variation suggests Alduin isn't simply a mindless force of destruction, but a complex being who understands the weight of the choices others make, even when those choices oppose his own purpose. It humanizes the World Eater in the smallest, most subtle way, visible only to players who've explored every corner of his ancient dominion. The Thieves' Guild Golden Glow Secret. During the Loud and Clear quest where you burn Golden Glow Estate's beehives, there's a hidden consequence that affects honey prices across Skyrim for the rest of your playthrough. If you burn exactly 3 hives as instructed, honey prices increase moderately. But if you burn all the hives out of thoroughness or spite, honey becomes extremely rare and expensive in all Skyrim markets for the remainder of the game. Maven Blackbriar mentions this in passing if you talk to her afterward, making a comment about market manipulation. The game is quietly teaching you that the Thieves' Guild doesn't just steal. They control entire supply chains and economic systems across the province. Your choice of how many hives to burn permanently alters Skyrim's economy, a consequence the game never explicitly highlights but faithfully maintains. The Forgotten Vale's lurking memory. In the Dawnguard, DLC's Forgotten Vale, there's a location that appears empty but has incredibly detailed environmental storytelling. Near the Wayshrine of Learning, if you dive deep into a specific pool, you'll find a skeleton of a snow elf clutching a small music box. The music box is marked as a miscellaneous item with no quest attached, but if you keep it and visit Gelibor afterward, he'll comment on it without prompting, saying, "Where did you find that?" If you give it to him, he'll hold it silently for a moment before thanking you and explaining it belonged to his brother before the betrayal. This tiny interaction isn't part of any quest and is entirely missable, but it adds profound depth to Gelibor's loss, showing that the Snow Elf civilization wasn't just grand architecture and wayshines, but also small beautiful things like music boxes that people cherished and mourned. The Way of the Voices sound design secret. When the Greybeards teach you words of power, each one is voiced by multiple actors speaking in unison to create that deep, resonant effect. But there's a hidden detail in the audio design. If you listen carefully through high-quality headphones, you can hear that one of the voices in each shout is actually slightly different, representing Parthenax's voice layered beneath the Greybeards. This suggests that Parthenax is always present during your training, even when he's not physically visible, guiding the teaching from his perch atop the mountain. It's a technical detail that reinforces the lore about Paarthurnax being the true master of the Way of the Voice, with the Greybeards as his devoted students and intermediaries. The Mind of Madness. Sheogorath Identity. During the Mind of Madness quest, Sheogorath makes several references to events from Oblivion, and many players know he's implied to be the champion of Cyrodiil transformed. But there's a deeper secret in his dialogue. If you complete this quest after finishing the main quest line and becoming Thane of multiple holds, Sheogorath has alternate lines where he makes oblique references to shouting at dragons and time wounds that won't quite heal. This suggests Sheogorath isn't just aware of you as the Dragonborn, but is commenting on the nature of player characters across Elder Scrolls games, breaking the fourth wall in the most subtle way possible. He's acknowledging that he was once a player character who saved the world, just as you are now, creating a strange meta-textual loop where Daedric princes are aware they might be former heroes who ascended beyond mortality. The Thieves' Guild Nightingale Curse. When you become a Nightingale, Carlia explains you'll serve Nocturnal in death, but there's a hidden mechanic that affects your character's fate immediately. After taking the oath, if you commit crimes against the Thieves' Guild or betray Nocturnal's principles by returning the skeleton key, certain NPCs begin having nightmares about you. If you talk to innkeepers across Skyrim, some will mention having strange dreams about a figure in dark armor standing in shadow. The game is showing you that becoming a Nightingale doesn't just affect your afterlife, but begins transforming you into a creature of shadow and nightmare in the present, haunting the dreams of mortals even before you die. It's Nocturnal's influence seeping into the world through you, turning you into more than mortal, but less than entirely alive. Pieces of the Past. Alternative solution. During Pieces of the Past, where you assemble Mehrunes' razor, most players fight Silas and take the pommel to complete the blade. But there's an extremely rare alternative that few discover. If you've previously completed the Black Star quest, by choosing to help Nelacar create the Black Star instead of restoring Azura's star, and you have the Black Star in your inventory during the final confrontation with Dagon, Silas has additional dialogue. He'll notice the corrupted artifact and make comments about multiple princes watching this moment. If you refuse to kill Silas while carrying the Black Star, Mehrunes Dagon's dialogue changes slightly, suggesting he's aware of Azura's corruption and amused by it. You still fail the quest, but this interaction reveals that Daedric princes are constantly monitoring each other's champions and interventions, treating mortal quest lines as a form of competition or entertainment between divine beings. The Companion's Wolf Spirit Mystery. After curing yourself or other companions of lycanthropy, there's a hidden encounter that can occur in the wilderness. If you travel through certain forested areas at night after curing at least 2 circle members, you might encounter a ghostly wolf that doesn't attack, but simply watches you from a distance. If you approach it, the wolf retreats, staying just out of reach. This spirit is implied to be the collective beast spirit of the cured companions, no longer able to reside in mortal vessels, but not willing to return to Hircine's realm. It's stuck in a liminal state, haunting the forests of Skyrim. The game never explains this encounter, and the wolf eventually disappears forever after several sightings, suggesting it finally fades or finds peace. It's a melancholy reminder that curing lycanthropy doesn't erase the beast, it merely displaces it, leaving fragments of wild spirit behind in the world. Lost to the Ages Ethereum Formation. During Lost to the Ages, you collect Ethereum fragments to forge one of 3 items, but there's hidden lore in the Dwemer ruins explaining what Ethereum actually is. If you read all the journals and examine the environmental details carefully, the secrets suggest Ethereum isn't a natural mineral, but rather condensed time itself, crystallized into physical form. The Dwemer were mining fragments of temporal energy and forging them into tools that could manipulate reality. This explains why Ethereum items have such strange properties, and why the material is found only in specific locations where the Time Wound's influence might have leaked during the Dragon War. The Ethereum Wars weren't just about controlling a valuable resource, they were about controlling time itself, making the Dwemer's disappearance even more ominous. Perhaps they didn't vanish by accident, but deliberately, using Ethereum to step out of time entirely. The Book of Love's Hidden Blessing. The Book of Love, Quest for Mara, is often dismissed as simple fetch quests and matchmaking, but completing it grants a permanent blessing that has a hidden secondary effect. Beyond the 15% magic resistance, the Agent of Mara blessing causes certain dialogue to change throughout Skyrim. NPCs in love or married couples will occasionally make comments acknowledging your role as Mara's champion, even if you never helped them specifically. Guards might say things like, "May your love be eternal," instead of their usual lines, and the priests of other divines will show extra respect. More significantly, if you commit certain crimes or cruel acts after receiving this blessing, you'll occasionally hear a faint whisper of disappointment, as if Mara herself is watching and judging your actions. The blessing isn't just a mechanical buff, it's a divine gaze that follows you, rewarding kindness and gently reproaching cruelty. The Wolf Queen, Potema's lingering presence. After defeating Potema in The Wolf Queen Awakened, her spirit is banished, but there's a secret aftermath in Solitude. If you return to the Temple of the Divines at midnight on certain nights, you can hear faint whispers echoing through the catacombs. The whispers are Potema's voice, weakened but not destroyed, still trying to claw her way back to the mortal realm. If you've completed the Dark Brotherhood quest line and murdered Titus Maid II, Potema's whispers become slightly louder and more coherent, as if the Emperor's death in her city has given her spirit renewed strength. The game suggests that completely destroying a powerful spirit like Potema is impossible, and that Solitude will be haunted by her malevolence for generations. She's waiting in the dark places beneath the city, patient and vengeful, for another opportunity to rise. Laid to Rest, alternative discovery. In Morthal's Laid to Rest quest, most players follow Helgi's ghost to discover the Master Vampire, but there's an alternative path that's almost never found. If you ignore the ghost completely, and instead investigate the burned house during daylight hours, searching for a hidden basement, you can discover Leolet's lair before the quest officially points you there. Finding it early triggers unique dialogue from the Jarl, who's shocked you uncovered the truth without following the proper investigative path. More interestingly, if you find and kill Leolet before talking to Helgi's ghost at all, the ghost will appear during the next time you sleep in Morthal, thanking you for putting her friend to rest, even though you didn't follow her clues. It's a subtle acknowledgement that players can solve mysteries through exploration rather than quest markers, and the game rewards this initiative with alternate dialogue paths. The Forsworn Conspiracy's deepest layer. The Forsworn Conspiracy presents itself as uncovering corruption in Markarth, but there's a hidden layer about who really controls the city. If you read every note and letter in Nepos' house carefully, you'll find evidence that the Forsworn Conspiracy isn't actually about the Forsworn at all. but rather a power struggle between Silverblood and the Jarl, with the Forsworn being used as pawns. Nepos himself hints that he's not working for the Forsworn, but rather someone within Markarth's noble houses, though the quest never forces you to investigate this angle fully. The deepest secret is that the conspiracy is a false flag operation, with both sides manipulating the Forsworn narrative to advance their own political goals. The tragedy is that actual Forsworn people, whose land was stolen and culture suppressed, are being used as bogeymen in someone else's power play. The quest lets you discover this through careful reading, but never makes it explicit, trusting players to piece together the uncomfortable truth about Markarth's politics. The Whispering Door's Mephala connection. The Whispering Door quest for Mephala centers on the Ebony Blade, but there's a hidden detail about why the blade is in Dragon's Reach specifically. If you talk to Farengar after completing the quest and choose specific dialogue options about Daedric artifacts, he'll mention that every Jarl of Whiterun for the past several generations has heard the whispering, but refused to open the door. The blade isn't trapped in Dragon's Reach. It's being deliberately contained by a bloodline oath from an ancient Jarl who swore his family would guard it forever. By opening the door and taking the blade, you're breaking a centuries-old sacred duty and potentially cursing the Jarl's line. Balgruf's troubled behavior later in the Civil War questline takes on new meaning, as he's dealing not just with political pressure, but also the knowledge that the ancient protection his family maintained has failed. His family's defining purpose for generations ended on your watch, adding tragedy to his already difficult position. A Night to Remember's sanguine reflection. During A Night to Remember, when you wake up in Markarth's temple and have to retrace your drunken steps, there's a hidden detail about Sanguine's true purpose. If you examine the locations you vandalized and the people you interacted with during your blackout, they all have connections to your character's journey. The giant whose staff you stole was near a location you'll need to visit later for another quest. The Hagraven you were engaged to lives near a word wall you haven't discovered yet. Sanguine isn't just creating chaos for fun. He's actually guiding you toward locations and encounters that will benefit your adventure. His quest is disguised as random drunken mischief, but it's actually a Daedric prince using his unique methods to help you, showing that even the Prince of Hedonism has a strange form of benevolence. He's teaching you that sometimes the most important discoveries come from unexpected detours and apparent mistakes. The House of Horrors, false choice. In the House of Horrors, Molag Bal presents what seems like a choice between refusing him or accepting his quest, but there's actually no real choice at all. If you refuse to beat Logrolf, Molag Bal keeps you trapped in the house. You can't leave, can't fast travel, and eventually have to comply or reload a save. But here's the secret. This isn't a game limitation. It's intentional design. Molag Bal is demonstrating his sphere, domination. He's not asking for your help. He's forcing you to serve, showing that when dealing with the King of Rape, consent is an illusion. The game is making a dark commentary about the nature of Daedric princes. Unlike Meridia or Azura, who frame their requests as requests, Molag Bal simply takes what he wants. The only way to truly refuse is to never enter the house at all, teaching players that some forces in Skyrim are better left undisturbed than confronted and resisted. Blood on the Ice murder pattern. Windhelm's Blood on the Ice quest is famous for being buggy, but beneath the bugs is an incredibly detailed murder mystery. If you map out the locations of all the murders, both the ones shown and the ones mentioned in court documents, they form a pattern on Windhelm's map. The pattern resembles a Daedric summoning circle, with each murder victim placed at a specific point. The serial killer isn't random. He's following a ritual that would have resulted in a summoning if he'd completed it. The quest interrupts him partway through, meaning there are locations in Windhelm where future murders would have occurred if you hadn't stopped him. Some players have reported seeing ghostly figures at these unmarked locations, as if the victims who would have died are haunting the sites of their prevented murders. It's a creepy detail that suggests stopping a serial killer doesn't just save future victims, it literally prevents ghosts from coming into existence. The missing apprentice's magical signature. In hitting the books and the subsequent college questlines, several apprentices are mentioned as having disappeared or died, but there's a pattern to their fates. If you compile all the names mentioned across various college dialogues and notes, you realize that every apprentice who vanished was studying a specific school of magic, mysticism. This school was removed from Skyrim's magic system compared to previous games, but lore-wise, it still exists. The implication is that students studying mysticism, the magic of manipulating the fundamental laws of reality, kept accidentally erasing themselves from existence or slipping into parallel dimensions. The college faculty quietly stopped teaching it, but they can't bring themselves to officially ban it or explain what happened. The missing apprentices aren't dead. They're lost in the spaces between realities, victims of a school of magic too dangerous to practice. Their absence is a warning about the limits of mortal comprehension, which the college acknowledges through silence rather than proclamation. The Bard's College burning of King Olaf. The Bard's College quest culminates in burning King Olaf in effigy, but there's more to this festival than apparent. If you read all the historical texts in the college's library, you learn that the real King Olaf made a pact with a dragon, and that burning his effigy is meant to symbolically break that ancient oath. What most players don't realize is that burning the effigy actually has a magical effect on Skyrim. After completing this quest, dragon encounters in the Solitude Hold slightly decrease in frequency. The yearly festival isn't just tradition, it's actually functional magic, a ritual that weakens the old dragon pacts and makes the region safer. By participating and completing the quest, you've renewed this protective magic for another year. The bards aren't just entertainers. They're maintaining ancient protective spells through song and ritual, keeping Skyrim safer without anyone realizing their true purpose. Elder Knowledge's Dwemer Sphere Dialogue. During Elder Knowledge, when you explore Alftan, there's a unique interaction with the Dwemer Sphere Guardians that most players miss. If you have a Dwemer artifact in your inventory when you encounter them, some spheres will hesitate for a split second before attacking. The game is checking whether you're carrying Dwemer items, and the constructs are programmed to recognize their creator's technology. They still attack because you're an intruder. But that brief hesitation suggests the machines retain some kind of recognition protocol, a fragment of their original programming from thousands of years ago. It's a tiny detail that implies the Dwemer constructs aren't just mindless automatons, but sophisticated machines with complex behavioral trees that include friend or foe identification systems. The tragedy is that even when they recognize Dwemer craftsmanship, their base security protocols override all other considerations, leaving them as eternal guardians of ruins their creators will never return to claim. Discerning the transmundane's Septimus secret. Septimus Cygnus seems like a mad hermit, but there's a secret about his isolation. If you examine his camp thoroughly, you'll find fragments of correspondence with the College of Winterhold dated many years before your arrival. These Letters show that Septimus was once a highly respected scholar who was expelled from the college for dangerous research. Reading between the lines, it becomes clear that Septimus was studying the Dwemer disappearance and came too close to the truth. His madness isn't random. It's the result of Hermaeus Mora deliberately fragmenting his mind to keep him useful, but prevent him from achieving true understanding. Septimus is trapped in a cruel loop, smart enough to serve Mora's purposes, but too broken to realize he's being used. When Mora discards him at the end of the quest, it's revealed that Septimus was always meant to be a disposable tool, a finder rather than a knower. His tragedy is that he understood this on some level, but couldn't stop himself from serving anyway. Madness and ambition intertwined beyond separation. The Black Star Nelakar's hidden knowledge. When Nelacar tells you about Malin Varen and the corruption of Azura's star, there's something he doesn't explicitly say. If you examine the necromancer's journals in Ilinalta's deep carefully, you discover that Nelacar was actually Malin's student and assisted in the initial experiments before realizing how far his master had fallen. Nelakar's guilt over participating in the star's corruption is why he's so insistent that you help complete Malin's work by making the Black Star. He's not trying to help you. He's trying to justify his own past actions by proving that corrupting the star was the right choice all along. If you choose to restore Azura's star instead, Nelakar's disappointment isn't just about losing the Black Star. It's about having his choices condemned once again. The quest is partially about Nelakar's redemption or damnation, but the game never makes this explicit, leaving his emotional journey as subtext for attentive players to discover. Arniel's endeavor, final experiment. Arniel Gain's questline at the college ends with him disappearing in a flash of light, seemingly replicating the Dwemer's vanishing. Most players accept this at face value, but there's a deeper secret. If you complete Arniel's endeavor and then visit Blackreach, you can occasionally see a translucent figure that resembles Arniel wandering near Dwemer ruins. He's not quite ghost, not quite alive, existing in the same state the Dwemer achieved. The game never draws attention to this, and the figure disappears if you approach too closely. But it suggests Arniel succeeded in his experiment. He didn't die, but rather became whatever the Dwemer became, proving his theories correct, even as he lost his mortal existence. The tragedy is that he can't communicate his success to anyone, forever trapped in the liminal state between existence and absence. The smartest researcher at the college reduced to a lonely spectre in the dark. The Frostflow Abyss family. Tragedy. Frostflow Abyss is technically an unmarked quest, but it contains one of Skyrim's most tragic stories. The family killed by Chorus can be pieced together through notes and environmental storytelling. What's often missed is the final note from the father, which reveals he knew his family was doomed, but chose to fight rather than flee, believing he might save them. If you examine the positioning of the bodies, you can see he was trying to reach his daughter when he fell. The game lets you complete his final wish by taking the shattered saber and combining it with the journal to create a unique item. But here's the secret. If you place this item on the shrine of Arche in any temple, you'll hear a faint whisper of thanks, as if the father's spirit can finally rest, knowing someone honored his family's memory. It's a tiny interaction that isn't marked or rewarded, existing purely as a respectful conclusion to a family's tragedy. Kyne's Sacred Trials Spirit Beast. During Kyne's Sacred Trials, you hunt guardian spirits of animals, but there's a hidden mechanic about how these spirits react to you. If you've been primarily hunting animals for meat, rather than just killing them randomly, the guardian spirits are slightly less aggressive. They still fight, but they use fewer power attacks and don't summon as many adds. Conversely, if you've been slaughtering wildlife wantonly, they become enraged and more difficult. Kine is judging not just your hunting prowess, but your respect for nature. The quest teaches that hunting as necessity is honorable, while killing for sport or malice violates the natural order. This moral dimension isn't explained in the quest text, but is encoded in the encounter design, rewarding players who've role-played as respectful hunters, while punishing those who've treated Skyrim's wildlife as mere experience sources. The Man Who Cried Wolves, foreshadowing. The Man Who Cried Wolf, where you clear Wolfskull Cave of necromancers, contains foreshadowing that most players miss. The ritual being performed is meant to bring Potema's spirit back, but reading the necromancer's notes reveals they mention preparing the way for the Wolf Queen's return. This quest occurs before the Wolf Queen Awakened appears, meaning Potema's resurrection was being planned across multiple locations simultaneously. If you examine dates in various notes across both quests, you realize Wolfskull Cave was just one of several concurrent attempts, and even though you stopped it, the other sites continued their work. Your victory at Wolfskull Cave didn't prevent Potema's return, it merely delayed it. The quest teaches that evil schemes in Skyrim aren't simple linear plots, but complex webs, and stopping one thread doesn't unravel the whole design. The Cursed Tribe's Malakath lesson. When Malakath tasks you with helping the Cursed Tribe by retrieving Volendrong, there's a lesson in the quest structure about Orcish culture. Malakath doesn't simply give Volendrong to the strongest warrior. He requires you to prove strength through a trial, then return the hammer to the tribe rather than keeping it for yourself. If you examine Orcish philosophy and Malakath worship across Skyrim, you realize this quest is teaching the core Orcish value. Strength exists to serve the tribe, not individual glory. The test isn't whether you can retrieve the hammer, but whether you'll give it up for the collective good. Players who complete the quest while understanding this subtext appreciate that Malakath isn't just a Daedric prince of outcasts, but a deity who shapes his followers through challenges that test their values as much as their combat prowess. Ill Met by Moonlight's Hidden Path. Ill Met by Moonlight offers a choice between Hircine's Saviour's Hide or the Ring of Hircine, but there's a hidden third path almost no one finds. If you've completed the companion's questline and cured your lycanthropy before starting this quest, Hircine has a unique dialogue acknowledging that you rejected his gift once before. If you then kill Sinding but refuse both rewards, telling Hircine you want nothing from him, he laughs and comments about mortals and their pride. You get no reward, but you get the secret satisfaction of having told a Daedric prince to keep his gifts twice. This option exists for players who want to roleplay characters who genuinely reject Daedric influence, rather than simply choosing between rewards. The game respects this choice by providing unique dialogue, but doesn't punish it mechanically beyond the lost items, letting your principles be their own reward. The Golden Claw's Unopened Path. The Golden Claw quest in Bleak Falls Barrow is most players' first real dungeon, but there's an environmental detail that's easy to miss. If you examine the architecture carefully, you'll notice there are sealed doorways throughout the ruin that match the style of the claw door. These suggest Bleak Falls Barrow is much larger than the accessible areas, with entire wings sealed off long ago. Some of these doors have claw symbols carved into them, implying that golden claw you retrieve is just one of several that once granted access to different sections. The barrow you explore is just a fragment of a once massive complex, most of which has been deliberately sealed, perhaps by the ancient Nords to contain something, or perhaps by the Draga to protect whatever lies in the deep places. The quest gives you a glimpse of Nord burial culture, while hinting that the true scope of these ancient structures remains hidden beneath Skyrim's surface. No stone. Unturned's true value. The Prowler's profit perk from collecting all stones of Baron Zyre seems like it just increases gem spawns, but there's a hidden economic consequence. With Prowler's profit active, you start finding so many gems that you can actually flood the Skyrim market, lowering gem prices across all merchants. If you sell gems aggressively, you'll notice merchants eventually have reduced gold and offer lower prices for precious stones. The game simulates a basic supply and demand economy, and your actions as the ultimate gem collector break it. The irony is that the more successfully you complete this quest, the less valuable its reward becomes. It's a subtle commentary on how infinite wealth devalues itself, and how becoming too successful at one type of gathering disrupts the entire economic ecosystem you're participating in. Lights Out wreck plundering. Alternative. During Lights Out, you help a lighthouse keeper lure ships to crash, but there's an alternative most players never try. If you refuse to help Jari Ra and instead warn the ship captains at the docks in Solitude about the plot, they'll give you a small reward and postcards at the lighthouse. The Black Blood Marauders plan fails, but you lose access to the broken ship's treasure. It's a classic risk versus reward scenario, but what makes it interesting is that Jari Ra and his gang don't disappear. If you betrayed them, they'll later ambush you at random while you're traveling near water, seeking revenge for ruining their scheme. The game remembers your choice and makes the Black Blood Marauders into recurring enemies rather than a one-time dungeon, personalizing the conflict in a way that rewards paying attention to consequences. Rise in the East's East Empire Company Secrets. Rise in the East has you clearing out pirates for the East Empire Company, but reading the letters and notes throughout the quest reveals uncomfortable truths. The East Empire Company was exploiting Windhelm's dockworkers, underpaying them and creating the desperation that led some to join the pirates in the first place. The quest frames you as restoring legitimate business, but you're actually helping a corrupt trading company eliminate competition that arose from their own exploitative practices. The game doesn't stop you or punish you for this, but it provides enough context that observant players can realize they're not really heroes in this questline, just enforcers for a corporation that's nearly as predatory as the pirates they're fighting. It's a grey morality lesson disguised as a simple clear the fort quest. The Affairs of Hagravens Environmental Story. The Affairs of Hagravens is a miscellaneous quest that simply tasks you with collecting Hagraven feathers, but the locations where you fight Hagravens tell a deeper story. If you examine the camps carefully, you'll see evidence of transformation rituals. Skeletal remains of women surround cauldrons filled with specific ingredients, and journals describe the process of becoming a Hagraven. The game is showing you that Hagravens aren't born, they're made, created, when women perform desperate rituals seeking power at the cost of their humanity. Each Hagraven lair is a tragedy, the end result of a transformation that seemed like salvation, but resulted in permanent monstrous exile. The miscellaneous quest becomes an environmental narrative about the cost of dark bargains and the kind of desperation that drives people to irreversible choices. Unfathomable Depths' Lexicon Gift. After completing Unfathomable Depths and returning the Dwemer lexicon, you gain the Ancient Knowledge perk, but there's more to it than the stated benefits. The perk description says it increases smithing experience and reduces armor weight, but data miners have discovered it also grants a tiny passive bonus to Dwemer construct recognition. Constructs are marginally less likely to turn hostile if you approach slowly, and their detection radius is slightly reduced. It's as if handling the lexicon has marked you with a faint Dwemer signature that their machines can barely perceive. The effect is so subtle most players never notice, but it suggests the lexicon imprinted some fragment of Dwemer knowledge directly into your character, changing you in ways both beneficial and mysterious. You've become slightly less of an intruder in Dwemer ruins and slightly more of a recognized presence, though never quite belonging. Forbidden Legends Guldur Brothers. Tragedy. Forbidden Legend presents the Guldur brothers as villains who murdered their father, but reading all the fragments and journals reveals a more complex story. The brothers didn't kill Guldur out of pure greed. They were terrified by his power and believed he was becoming something inhuman, corrupted by the amulet he created. Their murder was partially patricide and partially self-defense against what they saw as an increasingly dangerous sorcerer. The game never explicitly redeems the brothers, but it provides enough context to understand their act came from fear rather than simple malice. When you defeat their spirits and reclaim the amulet, you're not vanquishing evil, but rather ending a family tragedy that's echoed through the ages, putting to rest both a father's betrayed spirit and his son's desperate shades. Blood's Honor. Kodlak's Hidden Regret. During Blood's Honor and Kodlak's deathbed conversation, most players focus on the main dialogue, but if you've collected certain books about Isgramor scattered throughout Jorrvaskr, Kodlak has additional dialogue. He'll reference specific passages about Isgramor's relationship with the companions, revealing that Kodlak's greatest regret isn't accepting beast blood, but that the companions lost their way long before the werewolf curse. He saw the beast blood as a symptom of a deeper problem, the organization gradually shifting from honorable warriors to mercenaries who take any contract. His real dying wish isn't just to be cured, but to restore the companions to their original noble purpose. This context reframes Glory of the Dead, suggesting the quest is about more than lycanthropy. It's about the soul of the organization itself, revealing the unseen Ancano's unseen goals. During revealing the unseen, Ancano's true motives are supposedly about claiming the Eye of Magnus for the Thalmor, but there's a hidden layer. If you examine his quarters in the college and read his notes carefully, you discover he wasn't acting on official Thalmor orders. His superiors wanted him to observe and report, not to attempt a power grab. Ancano went rogue, believing he could use the Eye to reshape reality in a way that would make the Thalmor's political schemes irrelevant. He wasn't trying to win the political game. He was trying to break the game board entirely. His faction considers him a liability rather than an agent, which is why no Thalmor reinforcements arrived to help him. The quest reveals that even among organized factions like the Thalmor, individuals can pursue personal ambitions that undermine the group's broader goals, making Ancano a fascinating study in how zealotry can evolve into megalomania. The Cure for Madness. Festus's Kitchen. The Dark Brotherhood quest. The Cure for Madness has you attend a wedding and assassinate the bride, but there's a hidden detail about Festus Krex, the gourmet you impersonate. If you explore the Dawnstar Sanctuary thoroughly after the questline, you can find Festus's personal kitchen where he experimented with cooking. The recipes include human flesh prepared in gourmet ways, revealing that his famous cookbook's techniques could apply to any meat, including people. This reframes his role in the Brotherhood as not just an assassin, but a serial killer who turned murder into an art form, achieving fame while hiding his darkest practices in plain sight. His death at the Emperor's hands takes on a different meaning. Justice delivered unknowingly by a target who had no idea what kind of monster was approaching him with a serving platter. The Pale Lady's frozen lover. The Pale Lady in Frostmere Crypt is presented as a mysterious ghost, but if you read all the notes and journals in the crypt, you piece together her story. She was a young woman who fell in love with a bandit, and when he was killed by rival bandits, she took her own life in the crypt where they'd planned to hide their stolen goods. Her spirit isn't malevolent by nature. She's searching for her lover, who never arrived at their meeting place. The bandits who currently occupy the crypt are being haunted, not by evil, but by grief so powerful it transcended death. If you examine the frozen bodies carefully, one of them has a locket with a portrait matching the Pale Lady's appearance, suggesting her lover actually did come, but was caught in her grief-fueled curse, frozen forever in the place where they were meant to start a new life together. It's Skyrim's most tragic love story, told entirely through environmental details. Morning never comes. Muri's deeper motivation. When Muri asks you to kill Alain Dufont and optionally Nilsine, her stated reason is revenge for Alain's betrayal. But if you read her journals and letters that can be found in her Markarth quarters, there's more to it. Muri and Nilsine were actually close friends, almost sisters, before Alain manipulated Muri and used her to embarrass the Shattershield family. Muri's request to kill Nilsine isn't just about being thorough. It's about eliminating the person who represents everything Muri lost, the respectability and friendship she can never reclaim. If you kill both targets, Muri's relief is actually hollow. You can see in her subsequent dialogue that she's not happier, just emptier. The optional target exists to test whether you'll help someone commit an act that will ultimately harm them emotionally, making you complicit in her self-destruction. The dark choice isn't the darker reward, it's the darker outcome for Muri's soul. Waking Nightmare's true horror. Waking Nightmare in Dawnstar involves freeing the town from Vermina's curse, but the true horror is subtler than nightmare monsters. If you talk to every citizen about their nightmares before and after the quest, you realize the nightmares were forcing people to confront their deepest guilts and fears, things they'd normally suppress. After you free them from Vermina's influence, they go back to repressing these issues rather than dealing with them. The game questions whether releasing people from their nightmares is actually helping them, or merely letting them ignore problems that need addressing. Vermina's curse was cruel, but it was also involuntary therapy, forcing confrontation with internal demons. The quest resolution is presented as heroic, but a darker reading suggests you've merely allowed Dawnstar's citizens to continue their psychological avoidance, which might be its own form of curse. The Whispering Door, Nelkir's future. After completing the Whispering Door, young Nelkir has been freed from Mephal's direct influence. But there's a tragic aftermath. If you visit Dragon's Reach periodically after the quest, you can observe Nelkir's behavior changing. He becomes withdrawn and paranoid, occasionally muttering to himself. The game is showing that Mephal's corruption doesn't simply vanish when you take the ebony blade away. The child has been permanently marked by exposure to a Daedric prince's whispers during his formative years. You saved him from becoming Mephala agent, but you couldn't save him from the psychological scars. It's a reminder that victories against Daedric influence are often partial, and that innocence once corrupted is never fully restored, only salvaged in damaged form. Masks of the Dragon Priest connection. The individual Dragon Priest masks seem unrelated, but there's a hidden pattern connecting their enchantments. Each mask's power reflects the priest's role in dragon society. Croesus's archery buff suggests he hunted food for dragon temples. Morokay's magicka regeneration implies he was a researcher or scholar. Volsung's breathing and Price's buffs indicate he managed trade and resources. By examining what each mask does, you can reconstruct the administrative structure of dragon civilization. The masks aren't just powerful items. They're a historical record of how dragons organized their mortal servants, each priest specializing in different aspects of society. When you place them on the shrine and receive Kunahrik, you're symbolically uniting this ancient administrative council under a single leader, recreating a fragment of dragon-ruled society's structure. Repairing the File's Nurelian tragedy. The White File quest has you repair an alchemist's lifework, but there's a tragic detail most miss. If you read Nurelian's journal entries carefully and talk to Quintus before delivering the repaired file, you learn that Nurelian has been dying slowly for years, kept alive only by his obsession with the file. When you finally repair it and return, he dies peacefully almost immediately afterward. His life wasn't being sustained by medicine but by willpower and purpose. The moment his lifelong quest was complete, he had nothing left to live for, and his body finally let go. You didn't save him. You allowed him to complete his masterwork and die satisfied. It's a bittersweet quest that understands how purpose can keep people alive and how its completion can bring a kind of peaceful ending. Quintus's gratitude is tinged with the understanding that you hastened his master's death, even while granting his final wish, the Heart of Dibella's artistic secret. The Heart of Dibella quest involves a young girl named Fiotra, who's destined to be the next Sibyl. But there's a hidden detail about what being a Sibyl means. If you examine the Temple of Dibella carefully and read the books about her worship, you discover that Sibyls are supposed to embody divine beauty, but not physical beauty. They're meant to find and cultivate beauty in unlikely places, to see the divine in the mundane. Fiotra's destiny isn't to be beautiful herself, but to help others recognize beauty in their own lives. When you rescue her from the Forsworn, you're not saving a future beauty queen, but a future spiritual guide whose purpose is to transform how people perceive their world. The quest becomes less about rescuing a prize and more about protecting someone whose role is to make Skyrim itself more beautiful through changed perception. A Daedra's best friend's Barbas, purpose. Barbas, Clavicus Vile's dog companion, seems like a nuisance during the quest, but there's a deeper purpose to his character. If you pay attention to his dialogue and behavior, you realize Barbas represents Clavicus Vile's conscience and restraint. Every time Vile has made a particularly cruel bargain, it's been when Barbas was separated from him. The dog isn't just a pet or familiar. He's a fragment of Vile's own nature that he split off because it interfered with making deals. When you reunite them, you're not just helping Vile become whole. You're making him slightly less dangerous by reintegrating his conscience. If you keep the axe instead, you're ensuring that Vile remains in his crueler separated state, which might benefit you in the short term, but makes him more dangerous to all future mortals who seek his bargains. The choice is between immediate power and long-term cosmic responsibility. The Blessings of Nature Elder Gleam. Sap's secret. During the blessings of nature, retrieving sap from the Eldergleam is presented as the bad option compared to finding a sapling. But there's a hidden detail that complicates this. If you choose the sap option and then visit the Eldergleam later, you'll find that the tree has already begun healing from the wound you inflicted. Nature adapts and recovers, and the Eldergleam's power is such that your violence was a temporary setback rather than permanent harm. Conversely, if you take the sapling option, you've created a new sacred tree, but also split the Eldergleam's power between two locations. Neither choice is purely good or evil. They're different approaches to nurturing the sacred, one through controlled taking and the other through propagation. The game trusts players to make this decision without morally judging them, recognizing that relationship with nature has multiple valid expressions. Glory of the Dead, Kodlak's Sovngarde. After completing Glory of the Dead and freeing Kodlak from Hircine's curse, there's a hidden confirmation that he reached Sovngarde. If you complete the main quest line and go to Sovngarde yourself, you can occasionally spot a figure in the distance who resembles Kodlak, though he's too far away to interact with. This brief environmental detail confirms that curing him worked, that he did escape Hircine's hunting grounds and reach the Nordic heaven he desired. It's a subtle way of showing that your actions had permanent metaphysical consequences, that you didn't just help a dying man find peace, but actually altered his eternal fate. The game rewards completionist players who finish multiple quest lines with these small confirmations that their choices mattered beyond the immediate quest rewards. Innocence Lost, Aventus's Aftermath. After completing Innocence Lost and killing Grelad the Kind, most players never check on Aventus Aretino again. But if you return to his house in Windhelm periodically, you can watch his recovery from trauma. Initially, he's euphoric that his Dark Brotherhood prayer worked, but over time, his dialogue shifts to uncertainty and guilt about having someone killed, even someone as cruel as Grelad. Eventually, he can express regret, suggesting that revenge didn't heal him the way he thought it would. It's a mature handling of how children process violence and moral complexity. The game doesn't preach at you, but shows through environmental storytelling that even justified revenge has complicated emotional aftermath, especially for a child. Aventus's gradual emotional evolution is entirely optional to witness, but it adds depth to what could have been a simple revenge quest. Caught Red-Handed's relationship complexity. In Caught Red-Handed, you're asked to investigate Helga's promiscuity, but reading all the notes and letters reveals something more nuanced than simple adultery. Helga is using romance as a coping mechanism for deep loneliness and past trauma. The lovers you confront are each looking for different things in her: affection, validation, escape. The quest that seems like it's about exposing scandal is actually about people trying to fill emotional voids through connections they know are temporary and insufficient. If you blackmail Helga, her subsequent dialogue shows a person who's simultaneously ashamed and defiant, unable to stop seeking connections even knowing they're destructive. The game presents a complex portrait of how loneliness drives behavior that society condemns, but that the lonely person can't easily abandon, asking you to judge whether exposing this makes you a moral enforcer or just another person inflicting pain. Under Sarthel's excavation ethics, Under Sarthel has you exploring ancient Nord ruins with the College of Winterhold, but there's an ethical subtext about archaeological practice. If you examine the ruins carefully, you'll see evidence that Sarthel was a living city when it was destroyed, not just a tomb. The Draga you fight were people who died violently when the city fell, From an ethical standpoint, you're looting a mass gravesite for magical artifacts, disturbing the dead for academic and personal gain. The game doesn't stop you or judge you for this, but it provides enough environmental context that thoughtful players can recognize. The college's excavation is essentially grave robbing dressed up as scholarship. This theme runs through many dungeon delves in Skyrim, questioning whether retrieving artifacts from ancient sites is preservation of history or desecration of sacred spaces. The game trusts you to grapple with these questions yourself. Destruction Ritual, Spell's True Test. The Destruction Ritual spell quest seems straightforward, but there's a hidden lesson about magical responsibility. The spell you're asked to cast is incredibly destructive, and the quest requires you to use it against magical anomalies. But if you read the notes Feralda gives you about the spell's history, you discover it was originally banned because students kept using it recklessly, causing civilian casualties. The ritual isn't just about proving your power, but about proving you can be trusted with dangerous magic. The fact that the test happens far from civilization, against non-sentient magical entities, is deliberate. Feralda is ensuring you demonstrate control in a consequence-free environment before being given access to this magic in populated areas. It's the college's way of teaching that power without responsibility is just another form of destruction, and that true mastery includes knowing when not to use your abilities. Ancestral Worship's Dunmer Heritage. Ancestral worship in Raven Rock involves investigating a haunted tomb, but it's actually about Dunmer cultural preservation in a foreign land. If you talk to the quest giver extensively and examine the family shrine, you learn that maintaining ancestor worship is becoming difficult in Solstheim, far from Morrowind's cultural centers. The haunting isn't just a ghost problem, it's a metaphor for how disconnection from cultural roots creates spiritual unrest. By cleansing the tomb and restoring the shrine, you're not just solving a supernatural problem, but helping a displaced community maintain their cultural identity in exile. The quest becomes about the importance of a heritage and ritual in maintaining community cohesion, showing that even practical adventuring quests can carry deeper themes about identity and belonging. The Fabled Flagons of Skyrim's historical documentation. This miscellaneous Thieves Guild quest has you collecting historical drinking vessels, but it's secretly teaching you Skyrim's history. Each flagon comes from a different era and location, and together they form a timeline of Skyrim's major settlements and ruling families. Delvin's comments about each flagon include historical details that most players overlook, but if you pay attention, you're essentially getting a compressed history lesson about Skyrim's political evolution through its drinking culture. The quest rewards players who appreciate lore by using a simple fetch quest structure to deliver genuine historical education. It's Bethesda at their best, hiding learning inside gameplay in a way that never feels like obligation. Dampen Spirits Sabjorn's complexities. Dampen Spirits casts Sabjorn as a simple villain who knowingly sold poisoned mead, but reading all the notes in Honningbrew Meadery reveals more complexity. Sabjorn was being economically strangled by Maven Blackbriar's monopolistic practices, and genuinely didn't know about the Skeever infestation until it was too late. He made bad decisions trying to salvage his business, but he wasn't malicious, just desperate and in over his head. The quest is another example of Maven's ruthless elimination of competition, with you as her unwitting enforcer. Sabjorn goes to prison, not because he's evil, but because he challenged the wrong person's economic dominance. It's a critique of how corrupt systems punish the desperate while protecting the truly powerful, wrapped inside a simple dungeon-clearing quest. The Silence Has Been Broken symbolism. When Astrid burns and tells you to kill the Emperor's decoy, the quest title, The Silence Has Been Broken, has multiple meanings. Obviously, it refers to the Night Mother speaking, again after long silence, but it also refers to the Dark Brotherhood's broken tradition. Astrid violated the sacred silence by putting her own authority above the Night Mother's, and now that silence, the foundation of Brotherhood discipline, is permanently shattered, the questline becomes about restoring proper hierarchy, with you as the agent of tradition against Astrid's modernization. Every time someone mentions the old ways versus practical survival, they're articulating this fundamental conflict. The title isn't just about the Night Mother waking, it's about an organization's existential crisis between sacred tradition and pragmatic adaptation. The Fallen's Portal Stone Warning. During the Fallen, when you trap Odaviing, there's an environmental detail in Dragon's Reach most players miss. If you examine the Great Hall carefully before the dragon arrives, you can find ancient carvings on the walls, depicting dragons being captured in exactly this way. The builders of Dragon's Reach designed it specifically as a dragon trap, with the Great Porch serving as a landing pad and the reinforced rafters supporting dragon weight. The architecture you've been walking through all game was purpose-built for this exact moment, suggesting the ancient Nords knew dragons might return and prepared accordingly. Your plan isn't genius improvisation, but rather reactivation of an ancient contingency that's been waiting for use for thousands of years. It reframes Skyrim's past as far more sophisticated than it first appears, a civilization that thought in terms of millennial timescales and preparation. Bound Until Death's Victoire's Tragedy. During Bound Until Death, when you kill the bride, Vittoria Vici, the quest treats it as just another assassination. But if you read her journals and talk to NPCs at the wedding, you discover she was actually a decent person caught between political forces. Her marriage to Asgeir Snowshod was meant to bridge the Empire Stormcloak divide, bringing together two families from opposite sides of the Civil War. She was actively working toward peace, making her one of the few characters trying to heal Skyrim rather than exploit its divisions. By killing her, you're not just eliminating an Imperial target, but destroying one of the few genuine attempts at reconciliation. The Dark Brotherhood doesn't care about her motives, only the contract, teaching a dark lesson about how assassins can inadvertently serve the forces of chaos and division, regardless of their victim's actual character. The Walking Nightmare's permanent mark. After completing the Walking Nightmare and choosing either the Skull of Corruption or destroying it, there's a permanent but subtle change to your character. If you kept the staff, NPCs occasionally comment that you look tired or ask if you're sleeping well, even if your character is at full health. If you destroyed it, the opposite happens. People mention you seem well rested or peaceful, even when you haven't slept recently. Berminar's influence has permanently marked you based on your choice, either as someone who carries nightmares or someone who conquered them. It's a tiny, persistent reactivity that most players never notice, but that reinforces the lasting impact of Daedric encounters. You don't simply complete these quests and move on. They change you in ways both obvious and subtle, leaving marks that permanently alter how the world perceives you. Somerset Shadow's Secret Justice. During Somerset Shadows, you eliminate a rival Thieves Guild for the Thieves Guild, but there's a hidden path toward justice. If you read all the notes in the Somerset Shadows hideout, you discover they were actually former Thieves Guild members who left because they disagreed with Maven Blackbriar's corrupt influence. They weren't stealing randomly, but specifically targeting Maven's business interests. By eliminating them, you're helping Maven remove dissidents and resistors rather than eliminating actual threats to the guild. It's another quest where the Thieves Guild uses you to enforce an unjust status quo. The game doesn't provide an option to switch sides, but it does provide enough information that you can recognize yourself as the villain in someone else's story of resistance. Hail, Sithis' Empty Victory. Hail Sithis, the final Dark Brotherhood quest, ends with you killing the Emperor and being declared listener. But if you return to the Night Mother afterward, her dialogue suggests this isn't the glorious future you might expect. She speaks in vaguer terms, offering fewer specific contracts, implying that the Brotherhood's power isn't growing, but merely stabilizing after near destruction. If you examine the Sanctuary's rebuild carefully, it's significantly smaller than the previous one, with fewer facilities and resources. The victory is hollow. The Brotherhood survived but didn't thrive, and your leadership is of a diminished shadow of what the organization once was. The quest celebrates your success, while the environmental details mourn the Brotherhood's permanent decline, creating a bittersweet victory that matches Skyrim's themes about faded glory and diminished ages. The Drain Spotting Mysteries solution. There's an unmarked quest in Markarth involving investigating a series of small thefts from shops. If you follow the clues by talking to merchants and noticing which goods have gone missing, you discover a child NPC has been stealing food because their parents can't afford to feed them. The game never creates an official quest marker for this, leaving it as pure detective work. If you confront the child, you can choose to give them gold, report them to guards, or ignore it. No matter what you choose, the game tracks it and adjusts the child's fate accordingly. It's remarkable emergent storytelling that exists entirely for players who pay attention to NPC dialogue and notice environmental inconsistencies. Most players never discover it, but for those who do, it's a reminder that Skyrim's world contains stories beyond quest markers, narratives that emerge from systemic interactions rather than scripted events.